me welcome back to Senate Education, 3:15 Tuesday afternoon, the 6th of April. And we are going to have a walkthrough for the next and discussion for the next 45 minutes on S-114. And just to frame this up a bit, the House took our literacy bill, added their thoughts, their ideas. You'll see that it's heavy on the grant programs in terms of the changes they suggested. There aren't as many changes in other areas. If perhaps the best way to follow is Mr. Desmarais has this on our, and Jeannie has this on our website. And if you look, the changes are marked in yellow. So with that, I think just a general walkthrough, but please feel free to interrupt. We won't pull it up on the screen as long as everyone has it in front of them. And then we can kind of have a conversation with Jim and see where we might land on this. Senator Hooker, you look concerned. Everything all right? You've got it? You can find it? Okay, great. Okay, great. Just want to make sure. Okay. Mr. Desmarais, the floor is yours. Thanks for being with us.
Okay. So good afternoon. For the record, Jim Desmarais, Les Counsel. We are looking at a side-by-side of S-114 as proposed by House Education on a straw vote. So they haven't voted this out yet, versus your S-114 as you passed it, but also with the parts that were moved into H-315. Otherwise, you wouldn't have your grant program on this page. So it's a combination of your S-114 and H-315 as passed by the Senate. So differences are in yellow. You'll see that the section numbers are not aligned because the topics are aligned. And the first topic is the purpose of the Act. So what the House Education Committee has done, when I say has done, again, it's a straw vote, is they've taken your purpose. So the language in subsection A on the left-hand side is the same as your purpose on the right-hand side, except that they've added a subsection B and C, and the purpose of the B and C is to tie this more closely to ESSER funding. B basically just recites an ESSER 3 provision, which is a provision that allows ESSER 3 funds to be used to address learning loss. Okay, I won't read the whole thing, but basically this is about learning loss, and that is the category under which ESSER funds could be used for literacy. So this is a recitation in B of the language from ESSER, and then C ties up together. So C says, and on page 2, subsection C says, the purpose of the literacy grant program under section 3 of this act and the retention of an education project manager by the AOE under section 5 of this act is to carry out activities to address learning loss. So all that is just for the purpose of the argument that this is a legitimate use of funds for ESSER. The findings in section, well, again, section headings aren't going to be relevant as much, but the findings sections are identical. They've taken your findings. So A and B and C, so all the way through page 3 are your findings that they've taken. And they've added a finding of their own on page 4, subsection D, is they say they have added the General Assembly recognizes that improving literacy outcomes is a significant challenge for school systems and their constituencies, and they will require time and assistance in making necessary changes. So your findings for that one addition. You have a section 3, which amends section 2903 statute, and this is where you amended the statute which deals with reading to focus more on literacy. And this is where there's a statewide plan around this that has not been updated in years. So they did not take your section 3 because their approach, as you'll see later on, is that rather than amending this section now, they had the council that's being formed recommend back to you how the section should be amended. So they have the same type of approach, but with a different method. And then if you go to page 6 of the side by side.
Commissioner Perchlik?
Yeah, I had a question, Jim.
Yep.
Where did, I can't remember that language in section 3, our section 3, where did that come from? Did we take that from AOE or, superintendents, or did somebody present that and we put it in there, or did we kind of work it?
I flagged it for you because I recognized when I saw it that the focus is not aligned with your goal.
It's not.
Is that?
They not.
Not aligned with your goal because you're focused on literacy and this focuses on reading.
Mm-hmm.
So it was flagged for you, and so you changed it to focusing on literacy.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, the House approach is to have the council look at this and recommend back to you. Page 6 is the grant program, and this is where it's very different. So on the right-hand side is your language. You're appropriating $3 million for the purpose of providing professional development for teachers and methods of teaching literacy. That's just your provision is tailored to that kind of one area. Their grant program is very broad, if you will, and goes on for like 6 pages, 7 pages. It's a long section. So I won't take you through the whole thing word by word, but I'll give you the idea of it.
Right.
Their idea is that one or more supervisory unions, preferably more than one, coming together, will apply for a grant. What they are seeking to do is to enable, on page 7, where it says program creation and grant authorization, they want to enable SUs to adopt best practices in teaching literacy instruction to students in pre-K through grade 3. And they tie that back to Act 173. They encourage SUs to work together to apply for the grant funding. And their funding would be for three years of funding. And then there's a lot of language here as to informing, having the agency work with SUs about the availability of the grants, and how that would work in terms of who they should focus on. Then there was quite a bit of information on page 9 about what the application would have to include. So I won't go through all that language, but very detailed language about the application process. And then on page 10 about how that would be scored by AOE, and then how it would be determined by the secretary how to grant the funding. So a lot of detail as to the mechanics of this program. The way in which the awards would work is that it's $100,000 per application, and that's 3 years. So 100,000 in 2021, and then 100,000 in 2022 and 23 if the SUs are using their funds appropriately. And then really key to this bill is on page 12. So use of grant funds. It's in subsection D, and there is a shall and a may. So the shall in D1 says shall be used to establish a team to work on this, implement the applicant's action plan to improve literacy teaching outcomes. So they have to describe their action plan in the application. And so it'll be used to implement the action plan and to measure the results and outcomes. So that's the shall. And then page 13 are the mays. And they have lots of mays because their idea here is not to determine basically which methods are used, but to give options for different methods to be used. To avoid the whole conversation about reading words and what's the right way of doing it.
Well, just to clarify,
Yeah.
one of the reasons we're in this problem is because people have been doing all different kinds of things. I mean, that's, I think, what we heard from Ms. Bonesteel and Ms. Myers. Are they saying it's going to be a free-for-all again? And in the end, you may or may not end up making any improvements?
Well, they have to do the three shalls have to be done, right? The mays, this goes through the mays. So the first one, A, is building leadership and structural leadership capacity. So improving leadership in this area. B is to implement a coaching model. And C is to implement a different form of coaching model. So there's two forms of coaching here. D is to support educators in using collaborative data systems to promote improvement. E is to provide focused training on literacy indicators and outcomes, which, if offered, shall include each of phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. F is to employ universal design for literacy learning, which is around scientific research on how people learn. G is to employ evidence-based structural literacy instruction, including for students at risk for dyslexia. H is to employ any other proven method that builds sustainable system-wide improvement. So those are the A's. I don't think the House Education Committee would characterize it as being like do anything. I think they would say this is a more structured, evidence-based approach. But that's probably for them to testify to. And then E is an evaluation reporting requirement. So every year, an applicant will have to report back as to how they're doing. And then the agency will report back to you in January as to how the whole thing went. So basically, those are the differences in terms of the grant program itself. The other is around funding.
If we could just stick on the grant program for just
Sure, yeah.
a minute, just to see if any questions. I mean, as I recall, our granting program was very much with the agency. The agency should identify areas in schools where the need might be the greatest given scores, and we put some other criteria. And so it was heavy on the agency identifying and helping and giving grants to those teachers. Those teachers would then go out and use those dollars as they'd like. They're saying, no, the supervisory unions should apply and then create something that way. And my concern in this is, well, what if it just the supervisory unions that apply are the ones who are already knocking it out of the park? And is there a way, have they gotten to a point where that won't happen? In other words, is there language there that says we really, recognize that there are districts that are doing this well, districts that aren't doing this well, and we want to focus on the districts that aren't doing it well? Is there some language there?
Yeah, so go back to page 8 on the side by side. We didn't go through this in detail, but it's here. So page 8, subdivision B says the agency in providing information and technical assistance shall focus on eligible applicants that have a relatively higher percentage of one, students who scored over recent years lower on their city assessments. Two, students who come from families eligible for free and reduced price lunch. Or three, discrepancies in outcome data on literacy for students from historically underserved populations, including students who are BIPOC, ELL, and students on IEP. And that's
Our language.
huh?
That's our language.
That is your language, I think. And they use that both in terms of informing applicants, but also in assessing applicants.
Okay.
So
Before we go to center lines, I'm just wondering again, why make the school districts, and this might be a question for Representative Webb, why make the school districts go through this rather than have the agency who already has identified the groups that need it just do it,
I
given the level of urgency?
yeah, that's a question probably for Rep Webb, not for
Okay.
me. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Senator Lyons.
I'm trying to figure out where the plan fits in. So they've taken the plan away that we have on page 5. And so I'm trying to remember if that plan sort of wraps around the grant process. I mean, are we needing this plan before we start implementing all the grant work?
Well, the plan,
Just trying to figure out where it fits.
yeah, the plan is required by existing law, and the plan is just so people are oriented here on page 5. It says that in B, it says Board of Education in collaboration shall develop a plan for establishing a comprehensive system of services for early education in the first three grades. So the plan is in statute now. It hasn't been updated. I think testimony said since what, 2000 something, 2008 maybe. So both in your bill and in this bill, which we'll come on to, requires this plan to be updated. So regardless of whether you're amending the statute now or it's amended later on, if the House would do, the plan is still updated in both your bill and in their bill.
Okay, and then the next part of that, C, that's where we talk about evidence-based literacy instruction. So I'm just trying to figure out what is informing the grants process that is so fully articulated by the House. Is it the plan and the work that goes on up there on the page we were on?
I don't think so, because the House language came from a bill last year. They worked in this bill last year for a long time.
Okay.
And wrote the grant program even before they realized the section being amended here even existed. So I don't think that connection is there.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not putting a cart before a horse. You know, that the grant process fits in with the other sections of the bill, the planning part. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably best left for testimony for you in terms of
Yeah.
AOE or, yeah.
Okay.
So just another point of clarification. If this again is on the districts to apply, even though they may prefer certain applicants, it is still on the districts and supervisory unions to complete the application. Is that accurate?
Yeah, supervisory unions or supervisory districts would be applying.
So one of the things we have heard a lot about is that certain supervisory unions and districts don't have people to write applications, do this kind of, filling things out, if you will. So again, what I'm worried about is the wealthier, more staffed up districts are going to apply, and then still we're going to be in the same problem. Is there language in there that would make me feel better about that, or no?
Well, the language that we went through in terms of those focusing on those districts which have higher need.
But it's still on the districts to apply, correct?
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yep. Should I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. We're on page 15, and we're on appropriation of funds. So your appropriation was not a separate section. Your appropriation is $3 million. They have a separate section to appropriate funds. They appropriate $3,090,000. The $90,000 is for the agency, and B, set aside for them to give information and technical assistance and to do evaluation. So they bumped up their appropriation by 90 to cover those two areas. And this is coming out of ESSER 3 and funded for 3 years. Page 16 goes to Agency of Education staffing. And in your language as modified by appropriations, this came out of S315, you have established a limited service education programs manager position to help with the training program. And your appropriation would have come out of the $3 million. Okay. They have a separate appropriation for their for the same person, education project manager, but they appropriate $450,000 for 3 years to fund that position. So their appropriation, if you look at it, their appropriation in total is $3,090,000 plus this $450,000, and yours is $3 million. So just a different number.
May I ask a quick question right there, Jim?
Yeah.
So, my understanding, and I think the committee also, was that this position would be ongoing. In other words, it wouldn't end in 3 years. Literacy is such a big issue that it would just go, it would be appropriated and then forever kind of thing.
Well, the difference here, I should have mentioned this too. The difference here is your language creates a position within AOE.
Right.
Right. And appropriations wants to make it a limited service. I think
Right.
to see how it's going, basically.
Yeah.
Their language on the left-hand side says the agency should contract with an education project manager. So it's a contract. It's not a full-time position. It's a contract. So they will outsource this whole grant program, if you will, to a contractor to develop and work on.
Okay. I mean, I think that's a conversation we'll have to have with the Propes also to see if we can maybe get back to our original language. I just think I, for one, believe in agency. Somebody in the agency to do this work for the long haul is the way to go. I mean, the agency is kind of well known for contracting out, and I think sometimes that really works. But I think having a literacy coordinator, given the situation we're in, is really warranted. But that's something that we can talk to our friends in Approach about. It also goes to something we can talk about before we end. But for now, please feel free to continue. I don't see.
Okay. Next is the Advisory Council on Literacy. So the changes from what you have is you have 18 members. They have 15 members.
Fine.
On page 17, on the very top of the page, there is no statewide literacy coordinator on either your bill or their bill. So they changed that to the Secretary of Education or designee. Then down toward the bottom of the page, they have 7 members, and you've got 10 members serving 2-year terms. So the differences there are highlighted on the next page. So page 18, you have 4 teachers, they've got 3 teachers. And then you had 2 family members and 2 high school students. They've got 2 community members who have struggled with literacy proficiency or supported others. And you've got a Vermont Legal Aid person, and they've got somebody with expertise in working with students with dyslexia.
Do they not have any kids on this? Did they take the kids off?
No students.
They didn't think any students should be allowed to be on the committee and play a role?
I can just recount to you what I heard in committee, which is Rep. Brady, who is a teacher, said that she didn't think in this case students would be adding value to this group.
Oh, okay.
Well, I shouldn't say adding value. That's my language. Those were her words, but she didn't think that was going to be an appropriate role for students in this context.
Yeah, what school does she work at?
It might be,
okay.
she's a rep from Williston.
Oh, from Williston.
Yeah.
Yeah. She says that she believes in student involvement in lots of things,
But just
not
not this.
not this.
This is where she draws the line. Okay, just. Well, the other thing with this is I know that we were working to get young people on these committees in general, so I can, just in terms of civic education and experiences, so we can talk to the House about that. Thank you.
Yeah, they do have 2 community members with experience, right? So they put in the 2 community members who struggle with or support others. So they're trying to get, I guess, some experience on there in a different way. Yep. So then we go on to it's all the same. My highlighting is very, very light, so I'm having trouble seeing it. But okay, on page 19, if you look down to subdivision D1, this is where they've got, it says advise the State Board of Education on how to update section 2903 of this title and the plan, see the Statewide Literacy Plan. And you've got, because you've already amended section 2903, you've got how to update the literacy plan, but not the section itself. And then and 2, there's a reference in your bill to the statewide literacy coordinator at the end. That's been changed because there won't be one in either bill. That's the same. And then on page 20, this is on the powers and duties of the council. They've added number 4, which is highlighted, which is to recommend best practices for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 literacy instruction, and in order to best improve and sustain literacy proficiency. And then the report is the same. Yep. Let's see. Okay, and then they've got on page 21 in subdivision F2, there is no statewide literacy coordinator, so that person can't chair the council. So they've changed that to simply the council shall select the chair from among its members. Same. Okay. Yep. Then page 22. Their appropriation for the Literacy Council is $21,000 for a period of 3 years. paid for by ESSER funds. You've got $10,000 for 1 year paid for by the general fund. And the reason why it's not 30,000 in their bill, because they cover 3 years, you cover one, they've reduced the number of members. So that's why you got that difference as well. Then in section 8 on the left-hand side, they repeal.
But if I may, Jim, so
Yeah.
again, they are retiring the Literacy Advisory Council after a period of time, where ours was, it was an ongoing group.
Yeah, so this was done not by House Education, but by House Appropriations.
Okay.
And I believe they have a practice now of trying to set sunsets on things so they can reconsider them in a couple of years.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that the intent, I don't think, is to make it temporary. The intent is to just revisit this.
Okay. Yes,
I believe.
Okay. Thanks.
And then the implementation language is different only because you've got different people on the council. So as we stagger the terms, that had an effect here. I'll go through that, but basically it's just reflecting staggered terms. So at the bottom of page 23, this is the update to the literacy plan itself that hasn't been updated in a long time. And in your bill, you've got the state board updating the plan. In their bill, they've got the Agency of Education updating the plan, both with the collaboration of the advisory council. And then section 11, I think the teacher preps are the same language in both. And the Agency of Education reports, the AOE recommended the language in their bill. So bottom of page 24, it says on or before July 1, 2021, and on or before the first day of the beginning of each fiscal year thereafter through July 1, 2022, the agency shall provide a report to you on the status of implementation and on other related topics. And then you've got a report in your bill in 21 and in 22 and 23 on progress. So basically similar, but they adopted the AOE recommended language on that. And then lastly, effective date, both on passage.
Great. So committee, I guess one question. Do you know if Ms. Bonesteel played a role in any of this? Libby Bonesteel, Jim, by any chance?
Oh, I can't remember.
Or Ms. I think for me, the big outstanding question is, again, why would we make low-income districts that don't have the resources to apply for these things, which we've heard over and over again, go through a process to apply when they just may not apply? And therefore, we might just be accommodating the more well-to-do, if you will, districts that have the resources and the people power to put together an application. So that's, I think, perhaps my biggest question for the House. And then I think I can loop back to Senator Kitchell and others on the piece about, how can we get somebody in the agency permanently? And this goes back to something, Jim, I know you've heard this committee talk a little bit about, and I don't even want to say that I'm representing the committee on this. It's more something that I'm hoping the committee might be interested in it. And that is, can we get some language, not for this bill, but perhaps a bill that we can make some use as a vehicle on auditing the Agency of Education? I mean, I really do feel that for me, I need a blueprint. I think others in our positions in the next X number of years need a blueprint. We have blueprints for a lot of agencies, but I just don't know again, is it urban legend, or are we really have a problem with the Agency of Education in terms of staffing? And I know that if a river or a Lake Champlain were having any kind of environmental issue, somebody from DEC would be out there. But I don't get the same with the Agency of Education. I don't get a sense that people then head out and work on these things. Senator Lyons.
So, you know, you bring to mind the need for a program audit.
Uh-huh.
So what are the resources available and what's being accomplished? And the reason I say that is one of my concerns continues to be the level of guidance and policy within the AOE that helps facilitate work and solutions at the local level. So, so part of
Yeah.
what you're asking for, what I guess I would ask for as well, is what are some of the principles that we believe in for an AOE program? Do we want to have, because I've heard different stories every time from different members of the agency about having umbrella policies and how complete those policies are and how much is left to the local level, as I said before. So I like the idea of having some kind of a program audit. So what do we need to do and who do we have there working on it? And, you know, what's our belief or
Sort of
what's
our
the system like? What's the system look like, I guess?
Yeah, we can continue to have that conversation. I think, again, for me, and I could be wrong, and this is where I'll have Representative Webben, I feel like we're slowing down the process if we're waiting for people to apply, if we're not just getting those money to people in sort of the quick way, most efficient way. We're identifying where it needs to go. The agency knows where it needs to go. Let's get those teachers trained. But we can have Representative Webben to take us through a little bit of that. Any other questions right now? Senator Perschlick.
Yeah, Jim, you said that the statewide literacy coordinator was gone in both bills. I can't remember why it was out of our bill.
It was taken out by Senate Appropriations and changed to a program manager position.
Just to lower the cost, or?
I think you have to hear from them as to the rationale, but it is a position at the AOE as opposed to a contracted position.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of contracting positions, and I feel like this is just kind of continuing AOE to go contract, let somebody go. I mean, this is where I think you need consistency and a good person. I don't know. I know the House realizes that this is a huge issue, but I think one of the things this committee and our approach committee wanted to do is just say, hey, let's go at this as directly and as quickly as possible. And perhaps I think Representative Webb can take us through why this whole application process has to take place, which could take a long time to get something, or longer at least, to get something going. But we'll wait to hear from her tomorrow afternoon, hopefully. Anything else at this point? Okay. I think we can go offline, Jeannie.